Let me just get my timer ready and turn this off. Okay. Is anyone not ready?
Should we just make sure all the judges are here?
Okay. Yes, probably.
I'm here.
Yeah, I'm here. I just need to make my flow sheet. It'll be like 2 seconds. Sorry about that. Okay, I'm good.
Okay. Hi, my name is Eloise Villegottesman. I use she, her pronouns. I will be the first speaker for the affirmative. Is anyone not ready? Okay. I will begin my time. I stand on the firmest of affirmations that the United States federal government should place a cap on annual tuition costs to attend college and universities. The weighing mechanism for this round should be net benefits to the United States. Our plan is that the United States federal government implements a cap on college tuitions not to exceed 20% of federal student loan borrowing limit. So, for example, $57,500 is the potential student loan borrowing cap. So the annual tuition cap would be $11,500. The actor of this would be the United States federal government. Funding would be a wealth tax on the 1% and then normal means and ways for the rest. And the time frame would be the next 5 years. Our first contention is about the right to education. So the average cost of college in the US is $35,551 per student per year, including books, supplies, and daily living expenses. $25,000 of this is made up of tuition. Around the world, this cost is much lower. This is a very US-centric problem. In Europe, the average cost of the 100% English taught accredited bachelor's program is just $7,390 per year. We also say that in the US, 34% of young adults who aren't currently enrolled in college say it's because they cannot afford it, and college costs are only going up. So we say that if we lower this cost and if we make college more accessible, more people are going to go to college. So what are our links? Subpoint A, no one should be prevented from going to college simply because they can't afford it. In the government world, we allow more students to go to college without taking out exorbitant sums of money. Simply put, more people would attend college if they can afford it. This is inherent, and we will get into the benefits to going to college. So subpoint B, when students go to college, they gain more opportunities with life. We have 3 points under this. 1, a bachelor's degree holders are half as likely to be unemployed as their peers who only have a high school degree, and they are likely to make far more money in their lifetime, and their yearly salary is about twice as much per year. So you can see that there are big advantages to going to college, to getting this degree, in getting a job that has a higher salary and more promotion abilities, which we argue that many people want in their lives as to get financial stability. And then 2, we say that jobs are increasingly demanding of a college education. 75% of new jobs require some form of college degree. So as jobs become more and more requiring of a college education, more people are going to want to get this college education. In the government world, we make this accessible. And then 3, even for jobs that do not require a college degree, having one can still provide a competitive advantage. Between one candidate with a college degree and one candidate without a college degree, having a college degree still gives that candidate a competitive advantage in getting this job. So we say that there are clear advantages to getting a college degree. And if we make this more accessible, more US citizens will get college degrees. And then subpoint C, when students, especially economically disadvantaged, are able to gain more opportunities for life, for jobs, they are able to break the cycle of poverty. This means in net, we have less poverty in the US. As economically disadvantaged students, or all students, are able to attend college at an affordable rate. And having less poverty in the US, we say, is a net good. So what are the impacts here? More educated and prepared, students will be more educated and prepared for jobs, which leads to individuals with college degrees who are more likely to get a job with a higher salary and promotion ability and more able to break this cycle of poverty. which creates less poverty, less starvation, and good for lives, good for the quality of life of the US. Poverty is a cycle, and breaking the cycle is incredibly important. In the government world, we are giving people the ability to break this cycle.
POI?
Also say, I will take it at the end of this contention. We also say that helping disadvantaged individuals actually leads to more happiness because humans adapt to their situation. What is the POI?
Yeah, is this cap on public universities or is it on all like private universities as well?
It's on all universities. Our second contention is that more education creates a better quality of life for citizens in the US, as well as the entire US government. We say that college-educated individuals are more likely to be introduced to differing viewpoints and have the ability to see issues in a more complex view, which leads to less polarization and extremism. So what are our links here? Subpoint A, increased access to college creates more awareness and less polarization. College is often a time when students are exposed to new ideas, people, and perspectives. This can lead to personal growth and increased social awareness. And then subpoint B, in college, students from diverse backgrounds can come together and this creates opportunities for learning and personal growth. We also say that in the government world, this only increases as we are making it more accessible to underprivileged and underrepresented people in the US. And exposure to different cultures and ideas will help students become more open-minded and tolerant, which is important, especially in an increasingly globalized world. So how does this work? For example, if I grew up in a hyper-conservative environment, going to college is a way for me to expand my views and get out of this bubble of one type of polarized view. So polarization is incredibly bad and simply getting worse in the US, and college is a great way to combat this. So making college more accessible helps to combat this polarization. And then subpoint C, finally, if people attend college, they tend to be more educated. So what does this mean? We see that more educated people are a net good because one, they are more likely to be good at their job, to be good at helping others, and be able to fully solve the world's problems. They have the tools to be better members of society, be better at their jobs, to achieve more in their jobs, create more innovation. We say this is a net good for the US. And then two, they are more informed and able to make better decisions within their own lives. They are able to be more analytical about problems. They don't have to take simply just the word that they see on the news or on social media. They're able to be more analytical as they are given these tools to develop in college with classes and courses that you get in college. So what are the impacts of these? Those who go to college have the opportunity to learn about new people and ideas, become more open-minded and complex people and smarter in general. And we say this causes less extremism and less extreme polarization, which is better for the government and better for representation, as people are more likely to be informed and analytical about issues and able to make their own opinions, which leads to less extremist hate and views, which is better for the US population and quality of life. So for these reasons, I strongly urge a government ballot.
Okay, solid. Cool. So the overview is just that we have one long off with the neck, and I'll do that first and then move on to responses to the affirmation case. Is everybody okay if I give an off-time roadmap? Okay, I'm going to take that as a yes. And I guess even before I start my speech, just again, if any part of this K-Lit is unfamiliar to you, just let me know, and Rihanna and I will do our best to explain it. Cool. So off-time roadmap. So hi, judges. I'm Abby, and this is Rihanna, and we're seniors. Our experience in debate has been riddled with pervasive misogyny and racism, and at the last tournament of our career, we wanted to propose a critique of patriarchy within debate. This K is going to cover topics on sexual violence, assault, and suicide. So if these topics are not okay for you, just let me know, and I'll do my best to accommodate and cut that content out. Okay.
On the sexual violence point, is that going to be, can you give more of is that going to be more explicit or just general?
No, definitely not explicit at all. We're just going to be talking about the way that certain policies in the United States foster this kind of sexual violence, but no details, no graphic details.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to check.
Okay, cool. And as always, if there's something that you want me to cut, just interrupt me, POI, and I'll just move on. Cool. So if everybody is ready, my time will start now. So let's start with the framework, and the framework is going to tell you guys what the basis for what we are critiquing is. Now, there's 3 key points. The first is that this tournament is key. We see that debate is where we learn how to be engaged change makers, but we're constantly spoken over, demeaned with gendered slurs, sexualized, and forced to defend violence against gender minorities. We reject the affirmation's discussion of ineffective policy action and propose a counter-advocacy resistance strategy against the misogyny and violence that pushes gender minorities out of debate. Second is that one is not born a woman. Gender is not a biological reality, but a social identity. This means that the oppression that non-men face is produced by historical contradictions and our identity as others. Three is that critical understanding comes first. We're constantly fed media and media and knowledge created by patriarchal institutions, which naturalizes gendered violence. The A is that we don't know our real desires under patriarchy. After police officers in New Zealand passed the 2003 law that created loopholes to abuse sex workers, they wrote a study claiming that their policy was liberatory. This liberation rhetoric is constantly amplified by patriarchal media that shields the industry from criticism, even though that 80% of sex workers say that they wish to leave the industry but are unable to. Without analysis of feminist theory, we cannot know the true impacts of policy. Next, the interpretation. The interpretation and judges, your role in this round is to vote for the team that best increases gender minorities' access to the debate space. Next, let's go to the links, and the links are going to tell us why we are choosing to run this critique and how the affirmation links into RK. So the first link is essentially about how tuition caps are actually really bad. We see that studies find that tuition caps that are proposed in legislation, like the one that my opponents are defending, actually don't decrease prices for students because universities always find a way to get around these tuition caps and increase prices through various ways, or actually increase their more predatory loan programs and actually decrease graduation rates. So even if enrollment increases, graduation actually decreases. We see that tuition caps also forces spending cuts, and these cuts are exacerbated in periods of financial instability like the one that we are experiencing right now, and have been for the past couple of years. We see that as a result, these studies find that tuition caps actually decrease the number of free services that the university provides to their students. And so some good examples of this are like free bus and car programs that take students and are like drive them essentially back from wherever they are back to their dorms safely, which are key to actually decreasing sexual assault on campuses. We also see that a lot of the grants that are being used to like fund women's and LGBTQ plus centers on these campuses have been diverted into just making up for like basic tuition costs. We see that this is uniquely important just because we see that even though 1 in 5 non-men and 1 in 16 non-men report experiencing sexual assault on campus, universities take action only for 1 out of 12,600 students for whom sexual assault misconduct offenses 1 out of 12,600 students who bring up this sexual misconduct offense. So we see that this is uniquely critical and that the tuition cap specifically created a system where students actually lose what little support that they have for increasing their campus safety. The second link is just essentially about how government involvement in education is generally bad, where we see that Title IX was used to protect men from sexual assault allegations, specifically at Michigan State, and how complaints that are filed under Title IX are not actually followed up with by the government. So the reason here is that this link essentially reveals like an underlying truth about the government where gender minorities feel like they cannot report things about the gendered violence that they face because of structural government problems. So this brings me then to the impacts, which will explain why a lot of these systems come to be. The first impact is violence, where we see that patriarchy is the internal link to violence. The A here is that parliamentary debate protects and ignores rapists. The I is that in 2020, the UOP forensics director was exposed as a rapist and groomer. And despite this, the first in-person NPDA national tournament after COVID was hosted at UOP. The double I guess, here is that in response to an article detailing violent sexual abuse within the high school party debate space,
Can you just repeat your evidence? UP director? I didn't get that.
Oh, yeah. So the statement is that in 2020, the University of the Pacific's forensic director was exposed as a rapist and groomer. But despite this, the first in-person NPDA national tournament after COVID was hosted at this university. And sponsored by the team at UOP. Okay, cool. So right before I stopped time, I was talking about how this happens in the high school party debate space. So I'm resuming time now. So former NPDL treasurer Everett Rutan said, "I don't think this has anything to do with us," in an NPDL board meeting after an article detailing violent sexual abuse within the high school party debate space was released. The B under this impact is that the patriarchal state is unwilling and unable to protect gender minorities. The warrant is that in 2005, a Supreme Court case ruled that police have no obligation to prevent domestic violence, even in instances of proven repetitive abuse. The C is that the liberal emphasis on choice turns current feminist resistance into shallow choice feminism, which defines any action taken by a woman or as uniquely feminist and ignores racial, class, and ability-related nuances. Choice feminism tricks young girls into thinking that OnlyFans accounts or life-threatening plastic surgery is liberatory. Next, let's go to the alternative, and this is the advocacy that we're endorsing. So the alternative is to vote negative to endorse our community-based feminist struggle in the debate space. Now, there's 4 reasons why our alternative is key. The first is survival. We see that we have to read this K to resist anti-critique and misogynistic ideology within the debate space and to normalize critical discussion of structural patriarchy on the biggest debate stage we can access. A is that this K is not the ends, but the means. The Chicago Women's Liberation Union's Liberation School started by teaching gender minorities political theory courses and then began mobilizing them to protest at local policy meetings. The B is that in the same way that the 2004 Louisville performance critiques made Parley receptive to non-traditional debate styles, our advocacy makes feminist theory more accessible, spotlights misogyny, and forces you to listen while fostering community by validating gender minorities' experiences. This approach is a prerequisite to the real-world strategies for like protesting and supporting unions and strikes or investing in safe houses for domestic violence victims like the Kurdistan PKK does. The second alternative point is incels, which we define as people who harbor deep hostility and anger towards women. The A is that our feminist theory confronts the misogynistic ideology that creates incels, and every time debaters watch us win with this critique, they are forced to confront the truth of our arguments, building resistance to misogyny. We also see that this methodology is the internal link to decreasing fascist violence, where neo-Nazi magazine Stormfront specifically recruits incels, and conservative vitriol is made digestible through misogynistic language. The 3 is footnoting, where the perm co-ops and steals our original argumentation, making it an instance of casual misogyny in debate. If you vote for the affirmative, you lose the spotlighting impact of our alt and footnote gender minorities' experiences of violent misogyny. The 4 is just solidarity. Rihanna and I stand with the Revolutionary Feminist Interim Committee, Palestinian Talat, and Nigeria SWA. This is an internal link to change because we identify real-world solutions to oppressive structures and force you to listen. Okay, so then let's go to the case proper. So the biggest thing to note is, again, what we read in our first link, where this idea is that tuition caps actually do not do any of the things that my opponents are talking about. We see that studies show that a 10% cut, not a tuition cap, but a cut in tuition prices actually increase enrollment by 0.24%, but decrease graduation rates by 0.5 to 0.6%. And so we see that even if a cut, which is actually actively decreasing the price of, like the sticker price of universities now, actually has this adverse impact, a tuition cap, which actually doesn't decrease the cost of universities, but decreases the amount by which they can increase, is going to have a further negative impact on graduation rates. And there's 3 reasons why this is key, and I'm going to read them on the first contention. The first is that if you do not stay in like school, if you enroll and then take on a bunch of debt for like your first year and then you drop out, you drop out with like a crap ton of debt, then you're probably worse off like in terms of like your economic circumstances than when you started. This is a net harm, and this turns all of their poverty impacts, because if you have a situation where 0.5 to 0.6% of people are less are graduating, then that's probably uniquely bad. But secondly, also cross-apply the point that if you're decreasing like the money that like colleges have for their education, you actually get worse education. This is what we are seeing when in states that are encouraging a similar type of policy, and these students also drop out. But lastly, just cross-apply the first link when we essentially prove that these tuition caps are linked with increasing sexual violence on these campuses, which is uniquely worse for everybody. So essentially what we see is that the affirmation essentially supercharges their impacts of poverty and violence on these campuses through their policy. Real quick on the second contention, just cross-apply the second link about how government like involvement in education is bad, but secondly, how colleges are actually radicalizing people who come in with like right beliefs and push them further to the right, or push them towards like choice feminism, which ideologically is like pretty negative. So for these reasons, you have to be voting neg. Thank you.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Elliot. I am the second speaker for the government in this debate. I use no preference or pronouns. So I actually identify generally as a non-binary individual. Just before we start the round, I want to do what we like to call a modest proposal. Oh, also one thing really quickly. We never hit Ks. We are not a K team. Berkeley is not a K school. We basically have, this is off time, by the way. I just want to make this clear. I think it's off time. Why not? I just want to make it clear because I want to say that like if my responses maybe aren't in the exact structure that you expect, and my responses don't have the exact words that you expect in theory, I apologize. This is both my partner and I's first year in debate. We are trying to gain access to the debate space. I apologize if the responses aren't like exactly as they should be in, I don't know, traditional K debate. Anyway, so our modest proposal, which I'd like to propose to the other team off time so we
Is
can
anyone
actually
else having?
Yeah.
Is anyone having the issue with his video or their video?
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe we should
Yeah.
Do you want to switch to my hotspot?
I can. Yeah. Give me a second.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
You have my hotspot password.
Yep, I have it.
Okay. Sorry about that. The Wi-Fi at my house is not amazing.
Can I go in?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, we
Oh,
can.
there we go. There we go.
Yeah.
Cool.
Now be
Let me know.
Would that help?
Is he any better now? Or okay, do you want to debate off my computer?
That would probably work. I can just flow off this one. That's a little bit weird, but
Okay. I can flow on your computer and you can debate on mine.
Let's see. Yeah, that's fine. Honestly, I'm just gonna.
Recording in progress.
So apologies for the internet issues here. And we're gonna get feedback again.
Okay.
I'm still frozen. All right, I'm just gonna give up.
Okay.
I'm still frozen. All right, I'm just gonna give up
I'm so sorry. This has not happened in a round until now.
today. Okay, I'm just gonna mute my computer. I'm just gonna fluff yours. So
Can I have your computer?
yeah, give me a second. We're gonna do a quick swap here. And my partner and I. Okay. Anyway, sorry, as I was saying, I'm not used to K-debate. Oh, you fixed the internet issues. I'm not used to K-debate. I'm not used to slowing on this computer also. But anyway, so apologies if my structure is not entirely correct. Secondly, we want to propose here on side government
I think you should.
a modest proposal. No, it's fine off time because I think it's a discussion. So we basically say, look, we are both debaters in the gender binary or gender non-binary, whatever, in the gender minority, right? We say that we think a discussion about how kind of gender permeates in the debate space would be really productive. So we're saying if you want to forfeit the round, I would love to have a discussion for about the next, I don't know how long it is until the next round, have a discussion about gender in the debate space and actually talk about the issues instead of having to argue over it in an argumentative setting, because we don't think that's actually productive. So I don't know. I just wanted to put that out there. Feel free to respond or not. I don't know.
Okay, yeah. I mean, we obviously want to have a productive conversation as well. The reason that we want to be able to win this round off the K is because our goal is to make it to further ELIM rounds in order to spread this message and also hopefully get on the NPDL YouTube and be able to create a more safe space for gender minorities. We also say that we want to be able to spread our narrative, and that's the reason that winning this round is important. And that a win for us would mean a win for the people that are fighting back against their oppressors, which is the patriarchy. That's the reason we want to win off the K. But if y'all have any questions, feel free to ask them.
Okay. Got it. All right. I don't know why I muted. I'm talking now. So I guess with that, I will start my time. I'll start my time now. So first, I just want to do a quick disclosure shell. My first time ever running a disclosure shell, so hopefully I do it right. Anyway, interpretation here is basically teams running K should disclose the K at the start of prep time to enable the other team to prep to promote both fairness and K education. The violation is that Op did not disclose the K until there was 8 minutes of prep left. They did it in the chat, and we didn't see the message until 30 seconds left in the round. We are not K debaters. We thought they were debating the resolution when they talked about case before the round. We explicitly prepped a case pertaining to the resolution. What are the standards here? The first standard is fairness. Op wants your ballot to turn the K, but we have 0 prep time for the K, and they have infinite prep time. This is patently unfair. I will send the text in chat. Yeah, patently unfair and fatally compromises our ability to have a meaningful discussion about the K. Our second standard is education. Op says that they want people to learn about the K, but they actively undermine basically our educational opportunities by not choosing us to give a chance to spend 20 minutes reading about the subject matter of the K. Instead, they chose the competitive advantage over K education and fairness. Voters, drop the debater. We say if you don't drop them for not disclosing, they will not disclose in future rounds. Sorry, if you drop them for not disclosing, they will disclose in future rounds. And if the K is right, they will have far greater impacts than voting them now. We say if you don't drop them for not disclosing, it will send the message that the K is just another example of tech over truth, and people will not take the case seriously as an actual advocacy, thereby actively undermining whatever project they say they're going to be promoting, whether it's rejecting the gender binary, etc., rejecting the patriarchy. We also say voting for undisclosed Ks also discourages lay debaters who feel like the game is rigged, like us, to either drop out of debate entirely or to avoid tournaments where Ks are fun. Unfairness is a prerequisite, therefore this turns the K. Finally, on T before K, because procedural fairness is a precondition for structural fairness, we say this theory comes before the K. Okay, now that is done, we also say that we can perm the K. So how does this work? Well, first, with the modest proposal, we still allow for the education of individuals in the debate space. As I point out, my partner and I are both in the gender minority, right? I am non-binary, my partner uses she, her pronouns, right? We basically say here that you're actively excluding us from the debate space, and also that with this perm, we can still have a discussion. But secondly, on the perm, right? What the NEG is basically saying here is that the US federal government shouldn't make any policy until we solve the patriarchy, until we solve kind of like the explicit whatever, until we solve the fact that there are minorities within society, right? We say this is obviously a priority, but like it doesn't make any sense for us to just stop doing any government policy, right? People starve, people depend on the government. We're saying we can both allow more access to college, I'll get into this later, and also basically do what the K advocates, i.e. prevent the patriarchy from and give debaters more access to debate. Okay. Now on framework. So they talk about how kind of the goal of the K is education. And we say, first of all, see our modest proposal. On the specific responses to modest proposal, they say that like they want to be on the NPDL YouTube. Judge, this round is recorded. We say it'll probably be very popular for people to see a non-K team win against a K and talk about procedural fairness, right? No one really, if two K teams make it to TOC finals, it's not that impressive. You say it's actually, we turn this because it's more impressive for a non-K team to win the K. Therefore, by us winning the K and you voting for us here, we gain more access to the debate space because people actually see that the K is being run. People see the access to the K, right? My coach is probably not going to play the TOC finals K round if we lose, but they might play this later if we win. This actively increases the access to the text of the K. This actually increases the access to debate. Secondly, again, just an observation on the K, my partner and I, both in the gender minority, this is actually excluding us from the debate space because we implicitly are not K debaters. We say that, look, Nueva's K school, we're not. Nueva knows that we're a non-K team. This is our first year parley. You're purposely excluding two people in the gender minority from the debate space while running your K. We should win here because we actually provide more education, because as two individuals in the gender minority, it's basically unfair to us to have to oppose a K that we fundamentally like agree with, except for on the way that it's run and except for on the way that it's being executed in this round, right? We both think that more people should be more educated. We both think that people should be, not affirming the patriarchy, basically. The only difference is that, you're actively excluding two debaters who are in the gender minority from the debate round. Finally, on education specifically and on critical education, I'll get into this more later, but we say people attending university allows people to have more opportunities to learn about, gender studies, learn about things that are inherently anti-patriarchal, right? We say that basically what's important to understand is that our plan actually helps people learn about things that are not within the norm, right? How many high school classes have you had that focused on the gender binary and how we should enforce patriarchy? Probably none. Those exist at most colleges, especially at expensive colleges. There's a reason why college educated people tend to be more liberal. On links, we say specifically this K could be run as a disad. So there's no reason. The only reason why it's being run as a K is specifically because for the means of winning rounds. They also don't really tell us, I don't know. They have a lot of evidence stuff. They don't give warrants for why this evidence is true. Yeah. Judge, this permit specifically doesn't allow. Is that a POI?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think I'll have time, but I'll get to it at the end if I have time. We generally say that it's more important for. Oh, I forgot where I was in the flow here. Give me a second. Sorry, I'm not used to scrolling. Oh yeah, they say that studies find stuff. There's no warranting here. They don't explain how these studies work, why they find it, et cetera, et cetera. They also say that there's, problems when we cut funding, there are problems to stuff happening. The problems happen on these campuses. We say access to college is a prerequisite to good on-campus services. It doesn't matter if the services on campus aren't as good if people aren't going to college. Finally, they say Gov is bad. They talk about Title IX. They don't give any warranting as to why Title IX is bad. And secondly, we say this is solved by permanent K. The government can make policies that exist without and also do the K. And also talk about, rejecting the gender binary, et cetera. On impacts, basically we say they reject our models proposal. We would have a more productive discussion if the models proposal was A, successful, because then people would watch the YouTube video on it, but then B, it would just be better for both parties here. We would actually able to have a general discussion. they give a lot of specific examples here. Again, we generally agree that, like, yes, the patriarchy, it should be dismantled. We just say in a competitive space, debate is not the way to have this critical argument, because we have to argue against it. This is inherent. Secondly, they say is vote negative to endorse community-based feminist struggle. And they also say the role of the ballot is basically to, like, let me find the specific role of the ballot. The role of the ballot is to vote for the team that best increases gender minorities' access to the debate space. We are both gender minorities. Vote for us because you increase our access to the debate space. As first-year debaters, we have more access, and we will have more access going forward. Their access ends at this tournament, basically, which is sad. Okay, now on GovCase. So specifically, they talk about how tuition caps hurt, and they talk about how 10% cut decreases funding, right? There's no warrants for this evidence. Evidence is not allowed at this tournament. It has to have a warrant. Judges treat this as if they treat this as if they didn't have a citation to cite. And we say that, like, there's no explanation as to how this 10% decreases caps. We say universities profit in the status quo. Universities in the US makes billions of dollars every year. They can afford caps. Secondly, we say NEG doesn't solve for the impacts that they give you on right to education. We say people who are educated tend to be more productive in terms of, like, rejecting, the patriarchy. And then finally, on our second contention, they say basically cross-apply how colleges radicalize people. We say this does not happen. Turn this, because college-educated people tend to be more liberal in the status quo, and college is one of the main ways that people can access liberal arguments, the main way people can access gender studies, where people can access, classes that actually allow them to kind of, like, reject the patriarchy. We say education is a prerequisite to for adults. Education is important for basically understanding how, like, society actually exists. For this reason, vote Gov, because we in society as a whole reject the patriarchy better. So for this reason, and for the main reason that by voting for us, you are inherently preventing two gender minorities from access to the debate space, I urge a strong Gov ballot. Thank you.
Cool. Okay. So judges, the order for this speech, I'm going to start with kind of an overview statement on the top. I'm then going to move into analyzing the theory shell. This will just be kind of in the order of the theory. And then I'm probably going to cover the app case, or, I'll go framework and kind of like an overview on the framework first, then the app case, and then the links, alt, and impacts of the K. Cool. Okay, is everyone ready? Okay. With that, my time will start in 3, 2, 1. Judges, the overview of this debate run is that number one, you're going to see that the critique comes first, to the point where we are winning the argument. Framework, to the point where we are winning the argument on the framework level that tells you that critical understanding comes first because we don't know our real desires under capitalist patriarchy. You're going to believe that the K and the critical education of the critique is a prerequisite to understanding any theory argument that they read to you. In other words, because we are winning the framework level of the round, and therefore winning that the critique is the most important thing in this round because it interrogates our own subjectivities and deconstructs the way that patriarchy affects how we view the world, you're going to believe that you're voting neg on this critical understanding argument. On the theory shell itself. The counter interpretation is that teams running Ks may disclose the K at the start of prep time to enable the other team to prep. On the we see that we could have or we could not have. We did end up disclosing the critique. So we were able to disclose the K, and we therefore meet our own interpretation. I'm sorry, give me 1 second. On their interpretation, we do meet this because we disclosed the critique around the start of prep time, and also because we don't necessarily say that we're running a K. All that our position is just a disadvantage to their entire advocacy and then a counter plan. We tell you that we aren't actually violating this interpretation because we didn't propose that it was a K. We also didn't know our strat at the beginning of prep time anyway, and therefore we didn't really have any ability to disclose. So I'll get to that on the standards. Yeah, I'll take your PY. Yeah.
What time did you disclose the K to us?
Like about 10 minutes into the prep time, I think. I'm not totally sure. But all we're saying here, judges, is that like we, first of all, meet this because we didn't even say we're running a K. We just said we're running a critical position that specifically interrogates their subjectivities. You're also going to look to the fact that debate is just about the negative having the burden to negate the affirmative. And because we do that through our critique, we are like upholding our burden in this debate round. Okay. On the standards, okay. First, on the standard of fairness, there's going to be a direct turn here. You see that we are ultimately more fair for gender minorities because by being able to read our critique, we're able to actually create a more fair position for every single gender minority in this debate round. You're also going to look to the fact that there is no such thing as procedural fairness in debate because at every single tournament, there's always going to be someone that is somehow disadvantaged in some way, right? Whether it be a team that has had a longer amount of time to prepare and like understand arguments, whether it be a team that has had a longer amount of like education on a specific topic, there's always going to be some kind of unfairness, which should tell you that critical education is probably going to come first, but also that structural fairness and access to the debate stage for gender minorities is going to up layer any kind of procedural fairness claim that they make to you. On infinite prep time, this is non-unique to any kind of debate round. All our burden is the opposition is to just give you a position that negates the affirmative. No matter what that position is, there's always going to be some kind of lack of unfairness. We're not specifically or uniquely unfair because we do negate the affirmative. Also, debate is unfair for us anyway. There can be an infinite number of ways that the affirmative can prep their strategy out, and we have to spend our prep time coming up with links to match that, and our links could be moved just reading a different sense of offense. So fairness doesn't really matter here. On education, we see that we're better for education. They tell you that we are actively undermining education by not giving them time to spend 20 minutes reading about the subject. Number one, they knew that we were running critique because we said this in the round before. But number two, you're going to see that we're better for education because confronting new positions in every single debate round is probably going to be a key way to access better education. But also to the arguments that we make about how liberal education is specifically bad, right? We tell you that liberal education encourages choice feminism, which is negative because it ignores the nuances of identity and like class and the way that race affects the way that we look at gender. That means that any kind of liberal education they're giving to you is bad. You can classify the policy education bad arguments that we make to you on the framework level about how we tell you that policy always like naturally obscures patriarchy and policy upholds patriarchy. That's probably a direct turn on their education standard. On the counter standard, the first is going, so on our counter interpretation, we tell you that you should prefer our counter because it gives teams the chance to disclose or not disclose. But we also tell you that this means that judges don't vote arbitrarily on whether or not they believe that a team disclosed. So the first standard is going to be that of verifiability. We see that disclosure theory is specifically bad because it means that judges can't actually verify whether or not a team did something, right? Teams can lie in rounds every single time. If we came up here and we were like, oh, judges, we actually did disclose at the start of prep and we lied, you guys might believe us. And the reason you might believe us is because of structural disadvantages. Verifiability is super bad because it creates a situation in which racism can happen. Yeah, I'll give you the text account accuracy. It creates a situation in which racism can happen. A judge that has a bias towards one team over another might believe one team over another. And because there's a lack of verifiability, this means that any kind of disclosure theory is going to naturally create structural disadvantages. Two is access. We increase access to the debate space by creating a safe space for gender minorities. Our entire alternative is a net benefit to our interpretation. On the voters, they tell you drop the debater. Don't drop us, judge, because number one, we tell you that we're better for education, which up layers. And number two, we tell you that we are taken seriously if we win this debate round. If you drop us on this debate round, you buy that like any kind of unverifiable disclosure theory can somehow beat the critique, even though the arguments of the critique are true. They tell you that we discourage lay debaters who drop out, but we literally created a lay critique just so that we could increase access to the space and allowed for infinite POIs and POCs, which shows you that we are specifically good for fairness. They tell you unfairness is a prerequisite, but extend the arguments that structural fairness comes before procedural fairness, because we tell you that structural fairness controls how we view every single debate round, while procedural fairness is pretty much inevitable and happens in every single round because some teams are more experienced and some aren't. On our board, you're going to prefer education above fairness because we tell you that education is that we take out of this debate round, which is a key reason to vote for us. And you're going to look to the critical education arguments that we make to you about how critically, like based on critical education claims and the fact that critical education comes first, we're winning this round. Okay, on the perm proper, there's going to be a few responses here. Number one, extend Abby's entire argument where she tells you that you can't perm because it footnotes our movement. If you like vote for the permutation, you're voting for the side that doesn't take a risk and actually risk us losing this ballot in order to advance progress for gender minorities. You're going to see that you have to vote for the affirmative in order to endorse our strategy, because if you don't, you lose our speech act, which creates a unique rupture in the debate space that creates more safe spaces for gender minorities. That's direct reason to vote for us. Next, you're going to look at the fact that all our links are reasons not to prefer the perm. If you even believe a single link that tells you that the plan is specifically bad for gender minorities, you have to be voting for the negation team on the critique, and you can't vote for the perm. Okay, on the framework level, first on the modest proposal arguments and the fact that like they are gender minorities and we somehow exclude them, a couple key responses here. Number one, you're going to see that like we are specifically creating a better space for gender minorities by interrogating the way that gender minorities themselves can be complicit in any kind of subjugation. The one we'll give you here is that like Elizabeth Warren, for example, has often been complicit in creating like misogynistic policies and also created a policy, the CFPB, which is initially supposed to prevent neoliberalism and the spread of like bad policies, but is now being turned around to be used for Equifax to basically steal information from individuals. We tell you that Elizabeth Warren was not prepared in policy debate to control that kind of spread. And this is a direct reason to vote for us, because it means that policy debate education does not actually succeed in like teaching kids how to control the spread of bad systems. The next argument here that they make too is that Ms. Brown is already going to be on the NPDL YouTube anyway. The warrant that we're giving you here, Judge, is that every time you vote us up, you legitimize the critique and create a safer space for minorities by telling minorities that they are able to actually access the debate space while reading these kinds of subversive arguments. That's a direct net benefit to our critique and a reason to vote for us. Next, they tell you that the plan helps people learn, they tell you that like college is uniquely good, and reach these arguments that college are better for gender theory. There's a few key responses here. Number one, college proposes liberal choice feminist theory. Often that theory is co-opted by people that believe that, like, for example, sex work is a positive thing, there's sex trade is a positive thing. We tell you that these kinds of courses are often portrayed in college education. And also that because the dominant structures like the state control college education, you can't believe that college education is actually going to be uniquely better for like increasing the access to good choice feminist, to good anti-misogyny theory. That's going to be a turn to their argument about college. Finally, they tell you that under our role of the ballot, you should vote for them to increase their opportunity to access. The response here is that a vote for us is a legitimizing of the K, which means that we are able to actually keep running this critique in the next round, which probably increases access for gender minorities to the debate space broadly. And because we're proving that we aren't excluding them from this round by reading this K in a lay manner, by explaining every single term they ask questions about, and also by giving you a really clear alternative, you're going to be voting for us on this argument. Okay, on the case, you can just cleanly extend the 10% cut argument. The only response they have is that colleges can afford to pay this off. But the point where we give you arguments that colleges specifically cut down on services that help gender minorities first, and that grants will not be going to those services any longer, it's a clear vote that they're not winning the case arguments, because we tell you that this means that colleges will just refund, push funding towards programs that hurt gender minorities rather than continuing to fund and create grants for gender minorities. On the alternative itself, you can cleanly extend the alt because it pretty much goes cleanly conceded. This means that we're winning, that we are a survival strategy to resist anti-critique and anti-misogynistic ideology, and also that the K is specifically a way to increase and is a prerequisite for more education for gender minorities in the debate space. The more that we're able to read the K, the more that we legitimize anti-misogynist theory in the debate space, which means we can keep reading better alternatives and keep proposing better strategies to resist misogyny in debate. We tell you that this is specifically key because misogyny in debate is pushing people out of debate right now, pushing gender minorities out. Under the layer of the role of the ballot to increase access for gender minorities in debate, only our alternative can solve, because only our alternative encourages people to use their experiences in order to keep staying in the debate space, in order to have a safe space and keep being able to access policy debate. Because our critique is a prerequisite to actual access of policy debate in the round, and because we tell you that critical understanding and education comes above any kind of procedural fairness theory claims, it's a clear vote for the negation in this round.
Solid. So the order for the speech is just mostly going to be overview and weighing. And so to that end, if y'all are flowing, I would suggest you flow it on a separate sheet. But if you guys have a way that you're flowing already, feel free to do that. Okay. Does anybody have questions before I go? Good to go. Okay. Rihanna, let me know if I miss anything. Okay, cool. So if everybody's ready, my time will start now. Judges, the only side that you can be voting for in today's round is the negation, because we are fundamentally ahead on every single layer of this round. Now, let me just go down quickly on each layer and show you why we're ahead. So on the critical layer, you have to extend the role of the ballot, which goes uncontested throughout the entire round, essentially to vote for the team that increases gender minority access to the debate space, to the point where we see that to the point where we see that this is probably centering the most proximal impacts of the round, the violence that every person in this debate round is facing today. I was going to say room. This is probably a really critical. This is probably the best framing that you can possibly use to go about judging this round. But secondly, you also see that you have to be voting neg to essentially legitimize the type of rupture that we are trying to make in the debate space, but also to endorse our survival strategy and make it so that gender minorities have a space in debate and they're not constantly facing this sexual violence that is pushing them out of the debate space. This is uniquely key, and this is probably the biggest impact of the round. A vote for the neg is to vote for better debate space, and yeah, that's probably the most important. But Judge, even if you don't buy that, even if you buy that the critical layer is all BS, let's go to the theory level. The first thing to extend is just this idea that this critical position that we're reading is literally a disadvantage, where we have a major disadvantage to the the affirmatives plan, and also this advocacy, which functions as a counterplan to the plan. But secondly, we also just see that this the interpretation and this disclosure theory is actively against our understanding of patriarchy in the way that we can do policy debate, to the point where we see that the framework point about how we don't know our real desires under the patriarchy is conceded. We see that we cannot evaluate, you cannot truth test this theory claim without actually understanding what it means to what truth actually means within this patriarchal system. Secondly, just extend the counter interpretation that my partner Rihanna reads to you, where teams may disclose this theory. This is probably uniquely important because we ensure that critical education can still happen within the debate space, but makes it so that it is still accessible, and also that we can create change in the debate space without being beholden to policy debate, which actively perpetuates harms. Okay, yeah, we see on the verifiability standpoint, on the counter standard, we see that chauvinism and misogyny essentially controls which teams win in the world of the affirmation, because in the world of the affirmation, the judge votes for the side that they believe more. In the negation, we allow better evaluation of everything that is happening in the round. Okay. on the theory level, the only really thing that they can like go for is this like continued like fairness claim about like how we're making like the debate space like somehow like inaccessible. But again, to the point where we're reading a lay version of our K, making it as accessible as possible and taking every single point of clarification that my opponents can think of asking. The only thing that is blocking their education is their refusal to actually engage in the substance of the arguments that we are reading and to repeat like this fairness claim. And at the bottom, just again, like on the voter level, I guess like they're gonna say like drop the debater, but like to the point where we prove that like the counter interpretation in the K is better for critical education than debate space, and that theory is meant to set precedents for the way that we debate. Then voting us up on this theory is probably legitimizing like a better understanding of how we go about debate in a non-misogynistic manner and make it so that we are able to like engage in critical discussion in a more accessible way. Like you're like legitimizing the way that Ks can be read in an accessible manner. On the underview, just like look to the fact that like procedural fairness cannot be valued over structural fairness, just because we see that there is always going to be issues with procedural fairness, even in a completely lay setting, where some teams are just fundamentally more advantaged on like the things that they can access. We see that the only way that you can do this is probably by prioritizing structural fairness. Okay, we also just see that their interpretation is not verifiable because essentially either team could lie and say that they didn't get disclosure or say that they disclosed their all. This means that their interpretation is bad for misogyny in debate because judges will believe men over women. But on the case level, we also see that there's a massive disadvantage to the entirety of like their case, to the point where we see that like their tuition cap is insufficient in actually increasing like the number of people who are graduating. This fundamentally means that people are graduating with more debt and worse education. We also see that like colleges like again like pushing people in the, like who come in with like right beliefs farther to the right, and also like incentivizes the like selection of like choice feminism, which is uniquely bad for like good feminist movements. So at the end of the day, we see that you have to be again prioritizing structural fairness over procedural fairness and valuing the proximal impacts of violence in the debate space over anything else in this round. So for these reasons, vote neg.
Okay. Hi, one more time. Eloise Little Goddessman, she, her, hers. I have 5 minutes. My time will begin. I still stand on the firmest of affirmations that the United States federal government should place a cap on annual tuition costs to attend colleges and universities. Okay, 2 main voter issues of the round. First, the K versus the theory. So they disclosed the K to us 8 minutes into prep time in a private chat on the Zoom. We saw it right before the round started. They could have said it aloud. They could have explicitly explained to us that they were running a K, and they chose not to. We are not K debaters. They know this. We've debated case against them, and they are using the critique to gain a competitive advantage. Secondly, as 2 people in the gender minority, we are implicitly being excluded from the debate space. They say that we still uphold the patriarchy because we are not running this K, but this simply isn't true. And we also say that allowing us to win will further our access into the debate space. We also say that on popularity at TOC, if they really want this round to be watched by, as many people as possible, debating a K topic, 2 non-K debaters winning against a K topic will probably be more popular than the finals of TOC. This is unresponded to, so it flows across. There is more education for this K by voting for AF. Finally, we offered them the ability to have a discussion about this topic and issues. And we say that this discussion would have been far better if it wasn't in this format, if it wasn't this competition, and they chose not to as a tactical advantage. This discussion could have been recorded, this discussion could have been played, this discussion could have been posted, but it simply wasn't. So now we have an unproductive debate about this, and we could have had a very productive discussion and actually furthered people's understanding of these issues. But instead, we did not further understanding of these issues. We had an unproductive debate about the K. Finally, they never prove how they're going to create a better debate space. This is crucial. The gender minority Ks and feminism Ks have been read hundreds, if not thousands of times, and they give no warranting on how people seeing this will actually change anything. They simply say people will watch this. What's up?
Yeah. Sorry. The argument that gender Ks have been read thousands of times and have never had any solvency is new in this speech. We read the K in the LOC, and there was never a response to it in that level, and we don't have a chance to respond to it.
Okay. May I respond? I'm simply expanding and using an example of my partner's argument about how watching this K and people seeing this is not actually going to change anything. I'm simply giving the example of other Ks that have been read, but it's not new argumentation. Judge's discretion. May I continue? Is everyone ready? Okay. They give no warranting on how anything is actually going to change. Nothing has changed before, and this K They have not shown how it is any different, how it is actually going to change anything. So for this reason, we say that you can drop the K because it won't actually change anything, and they've never proved how it will. The only thing the K actually does is exclude us from the debate space. Okay. Next, on access to education. We say that the opposition basically ignores our warranting on how education minimizes polarization, extremism, and inherently patriarchal assumptions. We say that voting for government increases access to college education. How is this a net bad? They never explain this. They say that there's liberal choice education, and that's harmful. However, we say, one, they never fully warrant this, and two, some education is better than none. Some education on feminism, some education on these issues is far better than never going to college, being stuck in like your bubble of extremist hate and never getting access to any of these views. Further, they don't actually warrant how this works. So then to those being affected by this round, those being affected by watching this K round, the tiny amount of people that watch TOC rounds is going to be vastly outweighed by the benefits of every single US citizen having access to go to college. These aren't even comparable. And we can have this K round be recorded and be seen and still have the government plan go through, which is vastly outweighed. And then any small harm that they talk about these harms to how when taking away funding from colleges, gender minority groups get cuts to their funding. However, two main responses to this. We say, one, they never actually explain how this happens. They just simply say it does. We say this funding can be taken from plenty of other places, and colleges are still making a huge profit, so they don't need to be cutting this funding, and they never explain why this will actually happen. And two, the opposition world is far worse off because people can't access college in the first place. They don't have access to any groups about gender minority because they're not going to college, and they don't have this access, and they're stuck in their sounding bubble. We should not stop making education accessible until the patriarchy is dismantled or until all of these problems are solved, because it's incredibly harmful. And we can still teach about patriarchy. We can still teach about education and still let people go to college, still pass the government plan. So we vastly outweigh. So finally on weighing, so pre-fiat weighing, we outweigh on access to education because by voting for the negation, you are promoting access for debaters in the gender minority. A lay K is still a critique that we have never read before and we are inherently disadvantaged on. See the theory. Also, see our unresponded to argument that voting for AF makes this round more popular. Post-fiat, I believe I still have 15 seconds left. Okay. Post-fiat, we say that college-educated individuals have more access to anti-patriarchal teachings and are more likely to support Democrats in the status quo. Their only response is discussing liberal education and taking away funding, but what is the alternative? College education inherently creates more discourse on feminist theory. So for these reasons, I strongly urge a vote for the AF. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Good round.
Good round.
Good round.
Recording stopped.
Okay, looks like the ballot's in. Can come back into the room. So yeah, I can give the decision. So it was a 2-1 decision for opposition, I believe. And I was the squirrel judge, so I can go first. So yeah, just some like sort of like blanket statements. I am a pro-K judge. I didn't judge against opposition because they ran a K. That being said, okay, so just going through like my reasons for decisions, I had to flow for Gov based on their response to the K, not like the nature of the K itself. So on the theory shell versus K debate, I actually thought that Op won this point. I bought that their arguments that like unfairness in debate is going to exist no matter what. Therefore, arguing against a K on those grounds is sort of pointless. I think this was effectively won. I also bought that they did attempt to disclose and that there was just sort of like a mix up there. I don't think anything like pernicious was going on, and I don't think it was necessarily unfair. I just think there was some confusion. However, I did think the government brought up an interesting point. And it was sort of about like the ways in which the argumentative nature of a K can run contrary to having productive discussions on gender. And I think there's like ways to answer to this argument. I don't think like necessarily I buy this inherently. However, I just didn't really like flow any really strong opposition arguments to that other than like by giving us a winning ballot, like you're increasing visibility, etc. And I think like I really like this is another point that I thought won the debate for Gov, is like sort of the idea that like Gov can also be productive if you cast a ballot for them, because like the round is going to be visible no matter what. And it would especially be better almost if it didn't occur in a competitive way. And I think like this was an interesting argument that like judges and debaters have seen plenty of K debates, but not plenty of like just like neutral discussions. And I could see the ways in which actually like visibility might be even greater, because I've like never heard of that happening in a quarterfinal. And I understand like why opposition wouldn't want to just like do that, but I think it was an effective argument. So like whether or not it would be like more impressive for a K team / non-K team to win was like a bit of a wash. But I did buy that like the impacts could be equally accessed in both worlds. And then like what became then I had to make my reason for decision like on the fact that Gov adequately proves that affirming the motion would actually help diminish misogyny like net through like increased education. And I don't think that side op effectively argued against this point. I got that their reasoning mostly relied on evidence without clear warranting. And I buy that like colleges have enough money to keep social services running and that Gov's world wouldn't necessarily destroy them. And I just generally want to say that I do agree with a lot of the things said by side opposition and government, that these sort of topics need to be discussed further, which is why I'm a pro-K judge. Also, just like a personal aside, like I can't speak to like the white supremacy that occurs in like debates, but I can speak to having been a female debater throughout high school, especially one on the East Coast who had to deal with some of the same players still like entrenched in the debate world. So I completely understand why this is brought up. I understand a lot of like the anger towards debate as a format and the ways in which it upholds patriarchy. I totally buy. However, I don't think a K team necessarily needs to win to make visibility important and to have these discussions, especially when like the topic of the case doesn't really run contrary to that. And in fact, like this topic of the case, like actually was about dismantling a lot of the structures which the K team decried. That being said, I hope this clearly, like since Op won anyway, this ruling won't dissuade teams from attempting to do things such as these. I think they're very important, and I think this was an excellent round to watch. So thank you.
Thank you.
I can go next unless Karen, you'd like to, whatever. Okay, cool. So I'll echo a lot of the general comments that the earlier judge made. I thought this was a good round, interesting discussion. Liked the thought the K was interesting. Thought Gov made a lot of good points. Overall, I think my decision was much simpler than I expected before I started like writing and thinking about my RFD. And ultimately it comes down to basically one thing, which is that op provides me with a really clear role of the ballot. And at that point, I have to evaluate who best increases gender minority access to the debate space. I think op seems to be the one that's focusing on this explicitly. So at this point, like my null hypothesis is that I'm going to vote op. I think at this point, other issues largely fall out of the round, like fairness, education, case don't really fit into the way that I'm evaluating the round based on the uncontested role of the ballot. Thinking about these, fairness was tough, education, like I ultimately didn't evaluate these too thoroughly because I don't think they affected the role of the ballot. I think op wins both of these. I think case was close. I think I've made a lot of good comments about how lots of the op arguments on case largely relied on like sources, and I think the warrants are relatively intuitive, and I think we're almost there. It seems probably true to me that if colleges face like a big lack of funding, they're probably like one of the first things they're probably going to do is drop programs that are helpful for people who are who are less wealthy, who are gender minorities, and so on. But I think like this isn't an op ballot yet. I think there are a couple of things that I could potentially still vote for a couple potential gov paths to the ballot. So I think the first is perm the K. I think this is probably the best gov path, but I think op arguments about giving the ballot to the team who took the risk to run the K and the risk of footnoting outweigh. I hear like interesting stuff from gov about what is most likely to make a like more watchable round, on the on YouTube when the round get posted. But I think ultimately I buy that K is survival strategy outweighs. On op, I think on the potential for the K excluding gender minorities from the debate space, I think this is well dealt with by like the Liz Warren arguments. I think this interesting example that it's like gender minorities can participate in those structures as well. So I think at that point I have a pretty contested role of the ballot. And since op is the one who's focusing on that, I have to vote op.
Thank you.
Yeah, so my reasons for voting op are actually really similar to Nick's. I think that with the K, first of all, it was really just, I think, cool to watch. I am a fan of K's in debate. I think that my whole thing is like equity in debate, and I think that K's are a really great way of increasing equity. And I think that you guys really demonstrated how like exactly what the role of the K should be. On disclosure theory, I think that op also wins this argument because as they point out, it is a lay form of a critique, so they're obviously not trying to like out tech, in my opinion, the other team, and also allowing for infinite POIs, and then also the interpretation of like the teams make disclose, not must, which is true. Like teams aren't obligated to disclose critiques before, so I think that they win on that. And then for case itself, I feel like there are really good things that are coming out of gov, but opposition's pointing out that like the tuition cap actually decreases graduation rates, and also like this is going to affect especially gender minorities, which is the whole point of this round that we're having. I think that outweighs as well, so that's why I voted for opposition.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank y'all for this round.
Thank you. Good luck in your next rounds.
Good luck, everyone.
Questions about the K or want to talk about it, like we're totally cool with that.
Yeah, if anyone wants like speaker feedback, I'm cool. Oh, well, most people have left, so never mind. But, yeah.
Okay, thank y'all so much.